Welcome to Humanoids. For decades, we've been publishing work that pushes societal and artistic boundaries to create some of the greatest and best-selling graphic novels of all time. We pride ourselves in being transgressive and unconventional in what we publish. We think you'll see that with the material we have to present. We hope you enjoy it.
I am so excited to be able to talk a little bit today to two of our creators from Urban Legendz, Paul Downs and Michael Yates. Hey guys, thank you so much for coming online with us.
Hey,
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So Urban Legendz is one of my favorite books that we've put out, and it's definitely my favorite book in our big imprint. So can you guys tell us a little bit about Urban Legendz?
Yeah, so Urban Legendz is basically a supernatural coming of age story about a group of kids in Brooklyn battling real life urban legends. So it's kind of like a Stranger Things for kids kind of vibe, goosebumpsy, a little bit of X-Files in there. So they're battling things like alligators in the sewers and giant mutant bed bugs and the living gargoyles and things like that.
Yeah, like all of the different urban legends you've heard of growing up, they're all in there and they're all real.
And what inspired you guys to write and create Urban Legendz? Because you guys come from a background in animation.
Totally, yeah. Go for it, Mike.
Yeah, I think for me, like I grew up in middle school, like reading a lot of graphic novels and manga. And I think it was like a big inspiration for me to even get into animation. And I always like knew like once I got into a place where I wanted to just make my own stuff. I think I just loved stories of kids, especially in real danger, saving the world, and just like that kind of coming of age stories. And that was like a big part of what inspired me to be part of this project.
Yeah, and for me, I grew up in my backyard was literally a cemetery. So the whole neighborhood, we would all get together as kids and go and we'd explore, you know, the graveyard at night, and it was gigantic. So we would kind of make up these monster stories and these ghost stories and things like that and entertain ourselves through these amazing adventures that we'd have all the time.
I love that. Why do you think this particular story has been so popular? Because it's been very popular for us. We sold out, I think I was with you, Paul, when we
Yes, absolutely.
sold out during ALA last year. So we sold out in only like 2 weeks with this title. So why do you think it was such a popular story?
I can say that when we approach this, we try to approach it in a very truthful and honest way. So we tried to not talk down to the audience, and we tried to make it really real and relatable. So our hope was that kids and adults and teens reading it could see themselves in the characters, because we really set out to try to make it feel very grounded and real, where it wasn't only about the monsters, the literal monsters that they're encountering, but also the monsters of gentrification and relationships with authority and bullying and things like that, like very real, honest things that we were hoping that kids would be able to relate to.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like the characters feel like people you know. And I think for kids reading it, it's like very relatable to what the problems they have going on in their lives, but it's kind of wrapped in this fantasy elements of urban legends with a little light horror in there. And I think the deeper themes of everything that are in there really, I think maybe attract more teachers and parents, because it's kind of teaching your kids different lessons.
We did make a teaching guide for it too, so.
Right, exactly. And as animators, we're so used to caricaturing everything, to find reality and then heighten it. And with this one, we tried to do a little bit of that, but also be a little bit more truthful with what we were finding with everybody as well.
And because you guys come from animation, what is the difference? What's it like going from animating a movie to making a graphic novel? Is there a lot of difference? Is there a little bit? Because it's kind of like a storyboard, right? Similar feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's very similar in certain ways and different in others. I think the main difference is just like the amount of people is a lot less. So we're putting a lot more of ourselves into the project, I think, than you would in a big budget animation feature. But we kind of treated the process the same way, where it's just like iteration, getting up a pass, letting people read it, get notes, and just trying to make the best product as possible.
Yeah, and we had originally written it in script form, like screenplay form. And then when, Michael stepped in to do all the artwork, he did this incredible job of boiling down, because, you didn't have 110 minutes to tell this story. You had a certain number of pages. So he did an incredible job taking all of the written word and boiling it down to these perfect poses and expressions and shots. And he just did an amazing job kind of boiling it down and having it read really clearly and still hold on to the emotional parts of it.
Yeah, there's definitely some great action shots in Urban Legends, which when I first read it, I was like, wow, I never see action shots in like kids' books. And I loved that about the art. The part where he like at one point yells bat and the other kid throws him the bat and then he like smacks one of the monsters. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's two panels, but you feel your brain in betweens all of the moments that would have happened, and you feel the action, and that's all Michael.
Yeah, it's so great. So Paul, you teach. So as a teacher, why do you think like making young reader graphic novels, and Michael, you too, why do you think that's so important?
For me, I see them as just being, just these perfect art forms. They're sophisticated, they're visual. It's a great way of getting kids to be interested in reading, and it's a great way of staying interested. I wish that there were this many graphic novels out when I was growing up. I still go to comic shops and everything to just, absorb as much as I can, because there's so much incredible content out there.
Yeah, I think especially for me in middle school, just like reading graphic novels was kind of like the gateway into more and more reading. I think it's like almost a trick of like, I'm not really reading.
Yeah.
Like I would go through a week and I would just devour them, like one a day, sometimes multiple. And I think it's just really good to just read as much as possible, and any way, any form that it comes.
Totally. Yeah, I used to sell comics to people in a shop, and we had a big young readers section because it was kind of like it's like an easy way to ease them in when they get scared in a world where everything they see is more like animation. They go see movies for storytelling more than they read books. So having a graphic novel, which is visual and storytelling, but they have to read it, I think is just one of the most like amazing, delicious things that we can give, right? And you guys gave something amazing. So because we are talking about the role of like graphic novels in libraries, what role did libraries play in your life?
Yeah, I think for me, libraries were a huge part, especially I think from elementary school up until middle school. I didn't have internet at home. So I would always just visit the library and just hang out there for hours at a time, reading, exploring the internet. I think that also really helped me to get into animation, because I think spending those hours drawing, reading different graphic novels helped expand my mind and just different forms of storytelling in general. Yeah, it was like a huge part for my development.
Absolutely. I'm a little bit older than Michael, so I didn't know internet was a thing until college. So, but yeah, libraries were where you got your information. I knew I always wanted to be an artist. I always wanted to focus on animation, and the only place I could find any of that information was at the library. And we had two in my city, and both had very different feelings, but I would walk to both of them constantly and spend the day there and absorb, the people around me, the community, draw, read. It was just this amazing place to kind of get, a little bit of everything, to kind of stay connected to the community and everything. Because when you're there, there's teenagers working, but then there's also retirees there, and you kind of just get this great melting pot of culture and personality, and it's just a great way of kind of expanding your horizons a little bit.
Yeah, I love it. are we gonna maybe get a sequel to Urban Legends since we got a teaser at the end of this book? Maybe?
That's absolutely the intention. We would love to. We would love to continue the adventures of these characters. We all fell in love. We're part of these characters. You know, we're there's a little bit of each of us in all of them. So, you know, Nick is Cashew, and you know, Michael is Dwayne, and maybe I'm Maya. Maybe I don't know. But yeah, there's a little bit of us in all of them for sure. So we're psyched about the possibility.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you again so much, both of you, for coming on and talking with us about Urban Legends. Urban Legends is actually out, as you guys heard. We sold out. There is a second printing out. And actually, it is also one of the picks for the Junior Library Guild. So that's very exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
I am here with Koren Shadmi, who is one of our creators over at Humanoids, who did one of our top best-selling titles, The Twilight Man. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Koren.
Sure, great to be here.
So first off, you both wrote and drew The Twilight Man, which is amazing. So what inspired you to write a graphic novel biography about Rod Serling's life?
Well, I was a latecomer to the Twilight Zone. I always knew what it was from popular culture. I grew up in Israel, and we really didn't have the Twilight Zone, but we did have The Simpsons and other shows that kind of refer to the Twilight Zone, so I was aware of what it was, but I never really watched episodes of the original show. I watched episodes of, I think, the 80s reboot when I was there, and when I guess it's not that, you know, exciting or anything, but when it all became available on Netflix, I said, well, let me give this a try. And I thought the show was just incredible. It was, you know, so well made and so still, you know, talking about things that are still contemporary and still important, and it was really almost like these, some of them are cheesy, but some of them are almost like little art movies, and I was just so impressed by it and felt like really a connection to the show. And I thought maybe I'll see this guy who, you know, introduces it and created it and wrote it. Maybe there's something behind him. Maybe there's an interesting story. I know a lot of people are doing graphic novel biographies, so I ordered, you know, a few of his biographies, and they just sat on my shelf for, I don't know, 4 years till I was ready to, I was free to start a new project. And then I took them down and I started reading about him, and I was like, this is a great life story, and I thought it would make a great graphic novel.
Which it did. It made a phenomenal graphic novel.
Thank you.
So you have done so much writing and some art, but is this the first book where you did both the writing and the art on the title?
No, I've done writing and drawing before. I've had several books ranging from science fiction to kind of short stories that I wrote and drew. But this was the first time I've done nonfiction biography, which is a completely different beast, and it just required a lot of research. It required a lot of reading ahead of time, and a lot of visual research, because you're also the director and the set designer, and you know, you have to figure out how things looked back then and how people dressed, and so I had to do a lot of research. And he was a paratrooper too, so there was a lot of drawing of parachutes and military equipment and all these like ropes and things that were like super complicated. So that part was probably like the hardest part of the book. All these you know, American airplanes from World War II and parachute equipment. So, but I went past it and it got a little better after that.
And You said earlier how like you've seen more and more graphic novel biographies, which is true these days. Why do you think so many people are drawn to reading biographies, and specifically how a graphic novel biography is just a different experience than a normal biography?
I'm not sure. I think there's something that lends itself really well to the medium lends itself really well to someone's life story, because it is kind of an intimate medium. You're there with the page, and it's kind of close to you, and you know, the similarities kind of in between a book and a movie. And I think that if you see some of these biographies, they're thick. A lot of times they're really thick, and I think they're a little intimidating. And I think some people, especially today with the age of FOMO, and you have only so much attention span and only so much time, you might find that, you know, it's a good jumping board to get deeper into someone's life story, or just, you know, it's just as much as you needed to know, almost like, you know, why podcasts are popular now, where it's very self-contained and kind of easier to digest. So I think that is, you know, it's basically the visualizing it and having to kind of also boil it down to the essence, because there's only so much you can tell in 170 plus pages of comics. It's really, you know, if I translated one of those biographies into a graphic novel, it would be 400 pages or 500 pages. So you really have to narrow it down.
So now that you have done all this research, you basically wrote the book on it, you have gone and you've lectured about the Twilight Zone and Rod Serling. What is it, do you think, about the Twilight Zone that still just entrances audiences even to this day? And not just the new Twilight Zone, which we've seen that there's new episodes that are great, but the original. People are still going back and watching a show from the 60s. Why do you think that is?
Well, first, there's a big cult following for the show because it was in syndication forever. So it really became a hit only after it got off the air. So it was never a big hit while it was on. You know, people saw it when they were kids and they just never forgot. It kind of got etched into their minds and they're still obsessed with it. That being said, it's also still very, very, what's the word? Just contemporary. It feels very contemporary. It kind of lasted the test of time because it deals with issues like racism. It deals with issues like segregation. It deals with, you know, destruction of the planet. You know, there's all these things that really are still ringing true, and you know, seem to be still kind of bubbling now, not even underneath the surface of American life. So yeah, it's pretty incredible to see how it still is effective. And you know, even after the election, someone wrote an op-ed for the New York Times where he's saying, like, we live in the Twilight Zone now. So they keep kind of bringing it up. It keeps going back into mainstream media, and it just shows how timeless it is.
Yeah. Also that we're still dealing with the same issues that we were dealing with in this.
Yeah, still same stuff as the late 50s, which is a little upsetting, but
yeah,
you know, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, and I mean, if you guys have not gone and picked up The Twilight Man, which was one of our galleys last year at ALA, please do. It is one of our bestsellers. It's one of my favorite books in our Life Drawn imprint that we've done. And again, it was created all by this amazing man right here. So thank you so much, Koren, for talking to me about the Twilight Zone. Thanks for your time.
Sure. Thank you for talking with me.
Ibrahim, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so happy, guys, to introduce Ibrahim Moustafa, who is both the author and artist for one of our upcoming titles called Count, that is out in spring 2021. Ibrahim, could you tell us a little bit about Count?
Yeah, it's a kind of a sci-fi fantasy reimagining of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. So essentially, it's about a poor, lower class merchant sailor who is framed for treason and sentenced to life in a floating prison colony. It was very dangerous, and there are fights to the death. And he befriends an old man while in prison who teaches him how to fend for himself, and together they attempt an escape. And the old man was a military official who has the knowledge of whereabouts of a secret government cache of money that will make them both rich beyond their wildest imagination. So he escapes the prison, finds the treasure, and then attempts to exact revenge on his transgressors. But it ends up being a story that is more about class struggle and revolution than it is about revenge. You know, there's a quote I like that is featured in the book that is the best revenge is to be unlike he who committed the original crime. So, you know, the character is learning as he goes that it's not all about him and his vendetta, that there's a larger world at play. So.
Oh, I love that. So I'm guessing that you're a fan of The Count of Monte Cristo, the original story.
Yes. You know, it's a very dense, long, decompressed book. But it was the basis for it's kind of the granddaddy of all revenge stories, and I love stories about retribution and comeuppance. So yeah, that one has always kind of been a favorite of mine.
So you've always been drawn to like revenge stories.
Yes, and also swashbuckling, and you know that's actually one of the things about the original is you would think that the guy who wrote The Three Musketeers would have had a few more sword fights in it. But there aren't a ton. So so that was something I wanted to do as well, is kind of inject a little bit more action into it.
Yeah, there definitely is, because I actually finally read the whole thing and there is a lot of action in it. I loved it. And also, can I say that your art in it is phenomenal? Like your action art.
Thank you.
Action art, I think, is one of the hardest things to get right, like with the graphic novels and comics, right? Because you're trying to copy like such large, intense movements, and yours is beautiful.
Well, thank you.
So
I'm a big fan of the genre, so you know.
So you wrote the story and you did the art. So was that always your intention? And also, how hard was that, or was it like a benefit being able to do both?
Definitely a benefit. You know, I kind of look at it like dressing yourself, right? When you know, comics are all about collaboration, and it's a wonderful part of the process. And when you're an artist who's collaborating with a writer, it's almost like someone is picking your clothes out for you. You know, so sometimes it's not you don't feel like you're putting your best foot forward because I wouldn't necessarily wear that shirt with those pants, you know, on for this important occasion, right? So yeah, being able to you know, do it all from, you know, whole cloth from birth to earth is really an advantage for me. I started trying to be just an artist in comics because I was, you know, you sort of get the binary of writer artist hammered into you from early on. And over the last few years, I realized, oh, you know, I think I could actually make a go of this myself. So that's been my intent, to try to kind of write and draw all of my own stuff.
And so you started out doing art. I wonder, I mean, I've always seen in the comic book world sometimes kind of an extra judgment when an artist tries to then write. Like when you see someone who's an artist, who's like an amazing artist, try to write, a lot of the time their writing is critiqued more than other writers. Is that something that maybe you're scared of? I mean, you shouldn't be, because I've read it anyway. But
yeah, you know, I think that's always going to be an aspect of the conversation when somebody makes the jump to doing both. But I really believe that in the end of the day, comics are just about storytelling, right? So as long as the storytelling is there, and you know, as long as the writing is complementary to, you know, the end goal of telling a great story, then I think you know, hopefully it'll be workable for people.
So what made you want to do a retelling of, I mean, it's obviously one of your favorite stories, but what made you want to retell this classic story in a completely different world and universe?
Well, you know, it's one of those stories that I think it's influenced a lot of different media, both, you know, written and, you know, on screen. But it's never really been given any kind of a modern twist. You know, there was a really great movie adaptation from, I think, 2002, which is fantastic. But, you know, it's set in you know, France in the 1800s. You know, I just thought, wow, what if you took this idea and this general story and injected, you know, some more modern aesthetics to it, both in the way that it's told and also visually. And then I thought, wouldn't it be cool if this was almost like a sci-fi thing? And then, you know, I thought I should put a robot in this, and then it just kind of worked. So
like another robot just thrown into a story.
We love robots, right?
Robots. So with this story, what do you think about it is going to really kind of attract a larger audience?
Well, you know, I think the idea behind the overall story of you know, the kind of revolution that it builds toward is always timeless. In fact, we're in the midst of that right now in this country. So I think in that respect, everyone will be able to find something relatable within it. I think also just the general, you know, theme of being done wrong and wanting to make it right is pretty timeless as well. And, you know, part of the intent of setting it in this sort of otherworldly venue is that it's not going to be anchored by anything contemporary. So you could read it now, you could read it 10 years from now, and it won't change. You know, there won't be any phones that are outdated or, you know, any of that kind of thing. So
or pop culture references or anything like that.
Exactly.
That's very true. Yeah. So you went out trying to make a timeless classic out of a timeless classic. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, as lofty as that sounds, yeah, I guess I did.
And as someone who is an artist and a writer, you must have gone to libraries and things growing up, yes?
Absolutely, yeah. I was homeschooled until about the age of 10, and I have 3 sisters, and we grew up in a very poor single-parent household, so the library was a major part of our lives growing up. It was one of the only places, really the only place that the whole family could go, have a group experience, but also have our own individual experiences. You know, we're all different ages and whatnot. And then we all came away with something, you know, we all collected the books that we wanted, and, you know, and then you get a lasting experience from that one visit that you get to re-up every time you go back. So, you know, the library was a big deal to me growing up. And even now, I mean, I spend a good 60 to 80 hours a week at the drawing table. You know, it's just a very time-consuming job. And I use the Overdrive app through my local Multnomah County library system to listen to audiobooks as I work to keep me company. So, I mean, my whole life, really, the library has been a pretty significant friend, really.
Amazing. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Ibrahim, for being here with us and chatting a little bit about Count. Is there anything else, any other secrets you want to tell us about Count? Any little tidbits?
You know what? Yeah, since we were talking about the source material, the main character's name is Redzan Samud, and nobody has caught yet that Samud is just Dumas backwards, and then Redzan is kind of a jumble of Xander, which is shortened for Alexander. So, yeah, exclusive.
You heard it here first. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome to the Humanoids Showcase. We're going to be talking about a lot of books today from all of our different imprints, some of our best sellers, some stuff that's new and just came out, and also some upcoming titles. The first book, which is the book that Humanoids is famous for, is the INCAL. The INCAL, which was created by Alejandro Jodorowsky and the famous French artist Mobius, is the highest selling science fiction graphic novel of all time. It has inspired all of the science fiction movies that you've seen growing up, Star Wars, Blade Runner. This sci-fi masterpiece follows John DeFool, our lead character, as he tries to discover the coveted INCAL. He goes on a crazy wild adventure, a la Indiana Jones, on all different planets, meeting all different characters in this amazing science fiction masterpiece. The next on our bestseller list is CARTHAGO. CARTHAGO is the amazing science fiction adventure about the CARTHAGO company discovering that the megalodon, the prehistoric shark and great-great-grandfather of the white shark, is still alive and hungry. We follow a scientist and her daughter, who's so much more than we think she is, who has a special connection to these sharks, as they try to save them and keep them away from this giant corporation. Louisa Now and Then is a time travel coming-of-age queer romance about Louisa, a 32-year-old living in Paris, who one day discovers her 15-year-old self on her doorstep. It is a story of love and acceptance and change. And it is written and drawn by Carol Murrell, who worked on Waves, and adapted to English by Mariko Tamaki. This book has won the ALA Stonewall Honor Book Award, as well as a Diversity Award in 2019. Louisa is part of our Life Drawn imprint. Our Life Drawn imprint is our imprint focused on diverse voices, slice of life stories from different points of view. Other titles included in our Life Drawn imprint are The Twilight Man, Chasing Echoes, and Hedy Lamarr, An Incredible Life. Next, we have BIGBY Bear. BIGBY Bear was the first book in our Big imprint. Our Big imprint is our young readers imprint. With this imprint, we encourage our young readers to expand their minds, lose themselves in story, and most importantly, think big. This is the first in the BIGBY Bear series. All of our BIGBY Bear books are actually self-contained, so you can read them in any order. BIGBY Bear is a series of vignettes on imagination, science, mathematics, and life on our planet, all shared from the perspective of BIGBY, a bear living in the forest along with his fuzzy friends. For all of our big imprints, we also include educational guides, which can be found on our website. Here's what's new from Humanoids. Little Josephine, A Memory in Pieces. This is a beautiful first-hand account of an unlikely friendship between a visiting nurse and her patient, Josephine. Josephine suffers from Alzheimer's and has a lot of trouble remembering things. Together with her visiting nurse, they form a beautiful, unlikely friendship that will be remembered through the ages. In Vitro, written and drawn by William Roy, the same author as Hedy Lamarr, is the true story of a newly wedded couple who is full of life and love and have everything they could ever want except for, well, a child. This chronicles the true experience William and his wife had trying to conceive their first child. It is fun and funny and heartfelt, and definitely has a little bit of a Judd Apatow movie vibe. Metal Hurlant Selected Works. When Humanoids first started in the 1970s, they started a magazine called, well, in America, Metal Hurlant. And with Metal Hurlant, they decided that they wanted to discover different voices and stories and artists and bring them together to create something new. With this Metal Hurlant Selected Works, we take a bunch of the stories of science fiction, fantasy, even politics, and put them all together in one place for you. There's a lot of great stories, including stories by Jeff Johns and Kurt Busiek. NICNEVIN and the Bloody Queen. NICNEVIN and the Bloody Queen is a black magic folk horror story about a young teenage girl discovering her own power. It's definitely along the same vibes as Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, but in the UK. This book is actually one of Humanoid's first official YA titles. This book is leveled at 17+. Here's what's coming up with Humanoids. OMNI Volume 1, The Doctor is In. OMNI Volume 1 collects the first story arc of the periodicals that we put out called OMNI. OMNI is a story about a young doctor named Cecilia who is in the middle of Africa with Doctors Without Borders when she ignites with power. The power that she ignites with is being able to think faster than the speed of light. Which begs the question, what would you do if you could think faster than the speed of light? Meet Cecilia along with many other amazing characters in this social, political, very modern superhero story. The first volume of OMNI will be coming out in fall 2020. MPL is Sound. This book is the ultimate love letter to the funk pop rock sound that made the artist formerly known as Prince a legend. This book chronicles the journey of a fictional band called Star Child that is in Minneapolis and is inspired by Prince and eventually get to meet the living legend. This is a wonderful tale of a musician's journey with a whole lot of diverse characters and stunning art by Meredith Laxon, written by Joseph Illich and Hannibal Taboo. This book will be coming out in spring 2021. The Fire of Theseus. Forget everything you know about the classic Greek story of Theseus and the Minotaur. This is the true story of Theseus, and in this story, Theseus is a woman. This book is definitely for fans of shows and books like Game of Thrones and Greek mythology in general. Story by Jerry Friesen with art by Francisco Trefoli, coming in fall 2020. The 7 Lives of Alejandro Jodorowsky. This is the definitive book that explores all of Jodorowsky's creative ventures through his over 90 years on Earth. Alejandro Jodorowsky is a filmmaker and a writer and one of the most intense creative minds you could ever meet. This book is not so much a graphic novel at all, but his own version of a biography where you see the pieces of his life broken up into 7 sections based on what's inspired him as an artist and as a creator. For Justice. For Justice is the seldom told true story about France's most famous and notorious Nazi hunters and the heroes of the resistance, the Klarsfelds. Mrs. Klarsfeld actually became famous for being the woman who slapped Kissinger in the face. Yes, this is a true story, and it is everything that you could want right now in this social political environment. If you're a fan of the Amazon TV show Hunters, you'll be a fan of this book. For Justice is coming to you in spring 2021. This book was created with the Klarsfelds themselves, along with Pascal Bresson and Sylviane Derange. Young Leonardo. This is the second book in our big series of young books. Last year, you guys had Young Mozart. In 2021, you'll have Young Leonardo, which is, of course, stories about young Leonardo da Vinci. It's a very spirited glimpse at the childhood of one of the world's greatest artists and thinkers. Just like with Young Mozart, William Ogil did tons of research on the childhood of Leonardo da Vinci, and even visited some of the locations listed in his biographies to be inspired to create this book. It is a fun Calvin and Hobbes style book full of humorous vignettes about young Leonardo creating and discovering his art and many, many inventions. Just like our other young title, Young Mozart, Young Leonardo will have both an educational guide as well as activities printed in the back of the book for you and children to enjoy. Young Leonardo will be coming to you in spring 2021. Thank you for watching Humanoids Showcase for ALA Virtual 2020. If you have any questions regarding Humanoids titles, please contact me, Harley. My email is on the bottom of the screen. And thank you so much for watching.